My name is Sarah Mitchell, and 6 months ago, I was living what most people would consider the perfect life. I was the head of marketing for Pinnacle Industries, one of the largest tech companies in Silicon Valley. I had a corner office on the 42nd floor, a 6-figure salary, a beautiful apartment in downtown San Francisco, and the respect of my colleagues. I thought I had earned my place at the top through hard work, dedication, and 10 years of climbing the corporate ladder. I was wrong about everything. It all started to unravel on a Tuesday morning in March. I was preparing for the biggest presentation of my career, a campaign proposal for our new AI product that could potentially bring in $50 million in revenue. I had been working on this project for 8 months, putting in 16-hour days, sacrificing weekends, and pouring my heart and soul into every detail. The presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room. The entire executive team would be there, including CEO Marcus Blackwood, a man I had admired and respected for years. This was my moment to shine, to prove that I deserved the promotion to Vice President of Marketing that had been dangled in front of me for the past year. I arrived at the office at 6 a.m. to make final preparations. Everything had to be perfect. The slides were polished, the data was compelling, and the creative concepts were innovative. I had even prepared for every possible question the executives might ask. But when I walked into the conference room at 9:55 a.m., I found something that made my blood run cold. There, at the head of the table, was my colleague Jake Morrison, presenting my campaign to the executive team. "As you can see," Jake was saying, clicking through slides that I had created, "this integrated marketing approach will revolutionize how we position our AI technology in the marketplace." I stood frozen in the doorway, watching this man, someone I had considered a friend, steal 8 months of my work and present it as his own. The executives were nodding approvingly, taking notes, asking the questions I had anticipated and prepared for. "Jake," I interrupted, my voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "What are you doing?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me and I could see the confusion on their faces. Jake looked at me with what appeared to be genuine surprise. "Sarah? I thought you knew. Marcus asked me to present the Morrison campaign this morning." "The Morrison campaign?" I repeated, my voice rising. "That's my campaign. I've been working on it for 8 months." Marcus Blackwood cleared his throat. "Sarah, I think there's been some confusion. Jake brought this proposal to me 3 weeks ago. It's clearly his work." "No," I said, stepping into the room. "That's impossible. I have all the original files, the research, the drafts." "Sarah," Jake said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "I understand you might have contributed some ideas during our brainstorming sessions, but this campaign is my creation. I have all the documentation to prove it. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. How could this be happening? How could Jake be claiming my work? And how could Marcus believe him? Check the timestamps on the files," I demanded. "Check my computer, my emails, my research notes. Everything will show that I created this campaign." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Sarah, Jake has already provided all the documentation. The file creation dates, the email chains, the research citations. Everything points to this being Jake's project." That's when I realized what had happened. Jake had been copying my work all along, creating duplicate files with earlier timestamps, building a paper trail that made it look like he was the originator of every idea. He had been planning this theft for months, systematically stealing my work while pretending to be my friend and collaborator. "This is insane," I said, my voice breaking. "You all know me. You know my work ethic, my capabilities. Why would I lie about this?" But I could see in their faces that they had already made up their minds. Jake was well connected in the company, the son of a major investor, someone who had been groomed for leadership since the day he was hired. I was just another employee, regardless of my track record. "Sarah," Marcus said firmly, "I think you need to take some time to cool down. This kind of behavior is unprofessional and, frankly, concerning." "Unprofessional?" I laughed bitterly. "I'm being unprofessional for calling out theft? That's enough," Marcus said, standing up. "Security will escort you back to your office. We'll discuss this matter further once you've had time to reflect on your accusations." As security led me out of the conference room, I could hear Jake continuing the presentation, explaining his vision for the campaign that would make him a star in the company. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and completely powerless. Back in my office, I frantically gathered evidence to prove my case. I had drafts saved on my personal cloud storage, research notes in my handwriting, even photos of whiteboard sessions where I had outlined the campaign strategy. But when I tried to access my work computer to gather more evidence, I found that my access had been revoked. Within an hour, I was called into a meeting with HR Director Linda Walsh and Marcus Blackwood. The meeting was brief and brutal. "Sarah," Linda began, "we've conducted a preliminary investigation into this morning's incident. Based on the evidence provided by Jake Morrison and your behavior during the presentation, we've decided to place you on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. You're suspending me for being the victim of theft? We're suspending you for making false accusations against a colleague and disrupting a crucial business meeting, Marcus said coldly. If the investigation proves that your claims have merit, you'll be reinstated. If not, we'll have to consider termination. I knew the investigation would be a sham. Jake had covered his tracks too well, and the company had too much invested in him to admit they had been fooled. But I had no choice but to accept the suspension and hope that somehow the truth would come out. The next few weeks were the darkest of my life. Word of my breakdown spread quickly through the company and the industry. The official story was that I had suffered a mental health crisis and made delusional accusations against an innocent colleague. Jake was portrayed as the victim of my instability, a rising star who had graciously chosen not to press charges against his disturbed coworker. My professional reputation was destroyed overnight. Recruiters stopped returning my calls. Former colleagues avoided me at industry events. Even my friends began to distance themselves, unsure whether to believe my version of events or the official narrative that painted me as unstable and vindictive. The investigation, as I had predicted, concluded that Jake was the rightful creator of the campaign. The evidence he had manufactured was deemed conclusive, while my proof was dismissed as either fabricated or the result of my confused mental state. I was terminated for cause, which meant I lost my severance package, my stock options, and any hope of receiving a positive reference. Jake's campaign was implemented exactly as I had designed it, and it was a massive success. He was promoted to Vice President of Marketing, the position that should have been mine, and became the golden boy of Pinnacle Industries. Meanwhile, I was blacklisted from the tech industry, struggling to pay rent on my expensive apartment and watching my savings dwindle as I searched desperately for any job that would hire me. But the worst part wasn't the financial hardship or the professional humiliation. It was the gaslighting, the way everyone made me question my own reality. Had I really created that campaign? Was I losing my mind? Had I imagined the months of work, the late nights, the breakthrough moments when the perfect strategy had crystallized in my mind? There were days when I almost believed their version of events. Days when I wondered if I really was the unstable, delusional woman they had painted me to be. The isolation was crushing, the self-doubt was overwhelming, and there were moments when I considered giving up entirely. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew what I had created, what I had accomplished, and what had been stolen from me. And I was determined to prove it, no matter how long it took or what it cost me. I started working as a freelance marketing consultant, taking on small projects for local businesses while I planned my comeback. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, ate ramen noodles for dinner, and spent every spare moment documenting my case and looking for ways to expose Jake's fraud. I also began reaching out to journalists, hoping that someone would be interested in investigating corporate theft and the toxic culture that allowed it to flourish. Most ignored my emails or politely declined to pursue the story. After all, I was just a disgruntled former employee making accusations against a successful executive. Without concrete proof, it was my word against his, and his word carried a lot more weight in Silicon Valley. But I didn't give up. I couldn't give up. Because I knew that somewhere out there was evidence that would vindicate me, proof that would expose Jake Morrison for the fraud he was, and reveal the truth about what had really happened in that conference room. I just had to find it. As I sat in my cramped apartment 6 months after my termination, eating another dinner of instant noodles and scrolling through job boards that offered nothing but rejection, I made myself a promise. I would clear my name, reclaim my work, and make sure that Jake Morrison faced consequences for what he had done to me. I had no idea that within a few weeks, a single email would change everything and set in motion events that would not only vindicate me, but transform me from a victim into a hero in the eyes of the world. The fall from grace had been swift and brutal, but my rise back to the top would be even more dramatic. 3 weeks after I had hit rock bottom, living on instant noodles and rejection emails, I received a message that would change everything. It came from an email address I didn't recognize, whistleblower2024@protonmail.com. The subject line read, "You're not crazy. Jake Morrison is a fraud." My hands trembled as I opened the email. "Sarah, I know you don't know me, but I've been following your story. I work at Pinnacle Industries, and I have information that will prove Jake Morrison stole your campaign. He's done this before, to other people, and the company has covered it up every time. If you're willing to fight, I can help you expose the truth. Meet me at Cafe Luna on Market Street tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone. I'll be wearing a red scarf." A friend, I stared at the email for a long time, my heart pounding. Was this real? Could there really be someone inside Pinnacle who knew the truth? Or was this some kind of trap, another way for the company to discredit me further? But what did I have to lose? My reputation was already destroyed, my career was in ruins, and I was barely surviving financially. If this was a trap, I was already caught. If it was real, it might be my only chance for redemption. The next day, I arrived at Cafe Luna 15 minutes early, my nerves on edge. I ordered a coffee I couldn't afford and sat in a corner booth, watching every person who entered. At exactly 2 p.m., a woman in her 30s walked in wearing a red scarf. She was petite, with short black hair and intelligent dark eyes that scanned the room before settling on me. She approached my table cautiously. "Sarah Mitchell?" I nodded, and she sat down across from me. "My name is Elena Vasquez," she said quietly. "I'm a senior software engineer at Pinnacle. I've been there for 7 years, and I've watched Jake Morrison destroy careers for the last 3. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "Because I was almost his next victim," she replied. 6 months ago, Jake tried to steal a machine learning algorithm I developed. He copied my code, created false documentation, and was preparing to present it as his own work. The only reason he didn't succeed was because I had already submitted a patent application. Elena reached into her purse and pulled out a tablet. "But you weren't so lucky. Jake has been planning to steal your campaign for almost a year. I have proof." She showed me a series of screenshots, emails, file access logs, and internal communications that painted a clear picture of Jake's systematic theft of my work. He had been accessing my files, copying my research, and building his false documentation while I was working late nights and weekends, completely unaware of his betrayal. "How did you get this?" I asked, amazed. "I'm a software engineer," Elena smiled grimly. "I know how to access system logs, recover deleted files, and trace digital footprints. Jake thought he was clever, but he left a trail of evidence that any competent investigator could follow. Why didn't you come forward before?" Elena's expression darkened. "Because Jake isn't working alone. He has protection from the top. Marcus Blackwood knows exactly what Jake is doing, and he allows it because Jake's father is one of the company's biggest investors. They've created a system where Jake can steal ideas from talented employees, take credit for their work, and advance his career while his victims are discredited and pushed out. How many others have there been? At least 6 that I know of. Brilliant engineers, marketers, and designers who had their work stolen and their careers destroyed. The company either fires them for performance issues or forces them to resign by making their work environment unbearable." I felt sick. I wasn't just a victim. I was part of a pattern, a systematic abuse of power that had been going on for years. "What can we do?" I asked. "We expose them," Elena said firmly. "All of them. But we need to be smart about it. If we go to the media with just this evidence, they'll claim it's fabricated or taken out of context. We need something bigger, something undeniable." "Like what?" Elena leaned forward. "Jake is about to do it again. There's a brilliant young programmer named David Chen who's developed a revolutionary cybersecurity protocol. Jake has been positioning himself to steal David's work and present it at the Global Tech Summit next month. If we can catch him in the act, document everything, and expose the theft in real time, we can bring down the entire conspiracy." "How do we do that?" "We set up a sting operation. I'll help David document his work thoroughly, create an unbreakable chain of evidence, and then we'll let Jake steal it. When he presents David's work as his own at the summit, in front of thousands of industry leaders and media representatives, we'll expose him publicly." It was a risky plan, but it was also brilliant. Instead of fighting the system quietly, we would use the system's own arrogance against it. Jake's confidence in his ability to steal and get away with it would become his downfall. Over the next few weeks, Elena and I worked together to build our case. She introduced me to David Chen, a soft-spoken 24-year-old programmer who had developed a cybersecurity protocol that could revolutionize online banking. David was exactly the kind of brilliant, vulnerable employee that Jake typically targeted: young, inexperienced in office politics, and completely focused on his technical work. We explained the situation to David, showing him the evidence of Jake's previous thefts. At first, he was skeptical. Like I had been, he couldn't believe that someone would be so brazenly dishonest. But when Elena showed him the pattern of behavior, the systematic targeting of talented employees, David agreed to help. We created a comprehensive documentation system for David's work. Every line of code was timestamped and backed up to multiple secure servers. We recorded video logs of David explaining his development process. We even had him mail sealed copies of his work to himself to create additional legal proof of creation dates. Meanwhile, Elena used her access to monitor Jake's activities. Sure enough, he began showing interest in David's project, asking casual questions about the cybersecurity protocol, requesting to see preliminary results, and positioning himself as a collaborator. "He's following the exact same pattern," Elena told me during one of our secret meetings. "First, he builds trust and positions himself as a mentor. Then he requests access to the work under the guise of providing guidance. Finally, he copies everything and creates false documentation to support his claim of ownership. We watched as Jake slowly gained David's trust, offering career advice and promising to help him present his work to the executive team. David, following our plan, shared his research with Jake while secretly documenting every interaction. The breakthrough came when Elena discovered that Jake had scheduled a presentation at the Global Tech Summit titled Revolutionary Cybersecurity, the Future of Digital Protection. The description matched David's work perfectly, and the presentation was scheduled for the summit's main stage, the most prestigious speaking slot at the entire conference. "He's going to steal David's work and present it to the entire industry," Elena said, showing me the summit agenda. "This is our chance." We had 3 weeks to prepare. Elena helped me create a comprehensive dossier documenting not just David's case, but all of Jake's previous thefts, including mine. We had emails, file logs, timestamps, video testimonies from victims, and expert analysis of the stolen work. We also reached out to investigative journalist Amanda Rodriguez, who had been covering corporate fraud and Silicon Valley corruption for the San Francisco Chronicle. Amanda was initially skeptical. She had heard my story before and dismissed it as a disgruntled employee's revenge fantasy. But when Elena presented the evidence, Amanda's attitude changed completely. "This is huge," Amanda said, reviewing our documentation. "If you can prove that Jake Morrison is going to present stolen work at the Global Tech Summit, it won't just destroy his career. It will expose a systematic pattern of corporate theft and corruption at one of Silicon Valley's most respected companies." Amanda agreed to attend the summit and be ready to publish our story the moment Jake began his presentation. We also contacted the summit organizers, though we couldn't reveal our full plan without risking that Jake would be warned. As the summit approached, I felt a mixture of excitement and terror. This was my chance for vindication, my opportunity to prove that I wasn't the delusional, unstable woman that Pinnacle Industries had painted me to be. But it was also incredibly risky. If our plan failed, if Jake somehow discovered what we were doing, or if the evidence wasn't as compelling as we believed, I would be discredited forever. The night before the summit, Elena, David, and I met one final time to review our plan. "Tomorrow, Jake Morrison will walk onto that stage thinking he's about to become the star of the tech industry," Elena said. "Instead, he's going to become the face of corporate fraud." "Are you sure you're ready for this?" I asked David. "Once we expose Jake, there's no going back. Pinnacle will probably try to destroy your career too." David nodded firmly. "I've watched what they did to you, and I've seen the evidence of what they've done to others. Someone has to stop them. If my career is the price of exposing this corruption, it's worth it." As I went to bed that night, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 6 months ago, I had been a successful executive with a bright future. Then, in a single morning, my world had collapsed around me. I had been humiliated, discredited, and cast out from the industry I loved. But tomorrow, if everything went according to plan, the world would see the truth. They would see that I wasn't a delusional victim, but a whistleblower who had exposed one of the biggest corporate fraud schemes in Silicon Valley history. Tomorrow, I would go from being the villain of my own story to being its hero. The Global Tech Summit was held at the Moscone Center in San Francisco, and the energy in the building was electric. Thousands of industry leaders, investors, journalists, and tech enthusiasts had gathered for 3 days of presentations, networking, and deal-making. This was where careers were made and companies were launched, where the future of technology was shaped by the most influential minds in the industry. I stood outside the main auditorium, my heart pounding as I watched attendees file in for Jake Morrison's keynote presentation. He was scheduled to speak at 2 p.m. on the main stage, the most prestigious slot of the entire summit. The session was titled Revolutionary Cybersecurity, the Future of Digital Protection, and according to the program, Jake would be presenting groundbreaking research that will transform how we think about online security. Of course, every word of that research belonged to David Chen, who was standing next to me, looking pale but determined. "You don't have to watch this," I told him. "We have everything documented. You could wait outside." "No," David said firmly. "I want to see his face when we expose him. I want to watch him realize that his career is over." Elena approached us, carrying a laptop bag and wearing a press credential she had obtained through her contacts in the tech journalism community. "Amanda Rodriguez is in position," she reported. "She has the story ready to publish the moment Jake begins presenting David's work." The summit organizers have also been quietly informed that there may be an issue with the presentation's authenticity. We had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Our evidence was overwhelming. Time-stamped files proving David's authorship, video logs of his development process, email chains showing Jake's systematic theft, and expert analysis confirming that the work was David's creation. We had also compiled evidence of Jake's previous thefts, creating a comprehensive picture of corporate fraud that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. But despite all our preparation, I was terrified. What if Jake had somehow discovered our plan? What if he had modified the presentation to avoid detection? What if the evidence wasn't as compelling in public as it seemed in private? There's no turning back now, Elena said, checking her watch. Jake should be taking the stage in 5 minutes. We entered the auditorium and found seats in the middle section, close enough to see Jake's expressions but far enough back to avoid being noticed. The room was packed with over 2,000 attendees, including CEOs, venture capitalists, government officials, and media representatives from around the world. At exactly 2 p.m., the lights dimmed and Jake Morrison walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. He looked confident and polished in his expensive suit, his smile radiating the kind of charisma that had helped him steal credit for so much brilliant work over the years. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. "Today, I'm going to share with you a breakthrough that will revolutionize cybersecurity and protect billions of people from digital threats." I felt sick watching him, knowing that every word he was about to say was stolen from the brilliant young man sitting next to me. Jake clicked to his first slide, which displayed the title of David's cybersecurity protocol. Over the past 18 months, I've been developing what I call the Morrison Protocol, a revolutionary approach to cybersecurity that uses advanced machine learning algorithms to predict and prevent cyber attacks before they happen. The Morrison Protocol. He had even named David's work after himself. As Jake continued his presentation, it became clear that he was presenting David's work almost verbatim. The technical specifications, the implementation strategies, even the specific examples and case studies. Everything had been lifted directly from David's research. "This is unbelievable," David whispered. "He's not even trying to hide it. He's presenting my work exactly as I wrote it." Elena was recording everything on her laptop, creating a real-time comparison between Jake's presentation and David's original documentation. The similarities were so exact that it would be impossible for Jake to claim coincidence or independent development. 20 minutes into the presentation, Jake reached the section that would seal his fate. He began explaining the core algorithm that made David's protocol so revolutionary, using the exact same technical language and mathematical proofs that David had developed. That's when Elena stood up. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying across the auditorium. "I have a question about your algorithm." Jake paused, looking slightly annoyed at the interruption. "Yes? Could you explain how you developed the mathematical proof for the predictive modeling component? Specifically, the theorem you're using to validate the machine learning predictions?" It was a technical question that only the true creator of the work could answer in detail. David had spent months developing that particular proof, working through complex mathematical challenges that required deep understanding of both cybersecurity and machine learning principles. Jake's confident smile faltered slightly. "Well, the mathematical foundations are quite complex. Perhaps we could discuss the technical details after the presentation." "Actually," Elena continued, "I'm curious because the proof you're presenting is identical to work published by David Chen of Pinnacle Industries. In fact, your entire presentation appears to be based on Mr. Chen's research." A murmur went through the audience. Jake's face went pale, but he tried to maintain his composure. "I'm not familiar with Mr. Chen's work," Jake said, "but I can assure you that this research is entirely my own creation." That's when David stood up. "Actually," David said, his voice shaking but clear, "I'm David Chen, and this is my work." The auditorium erupted in confused chatter. Jake stared at David in shock, clearly recognizing him, but unable to understand how his victim had ended up at the summit. "This is my cybersecurity protocol," David continued, his voice growing stronger. "I developed it over the past 18 months while working at Pinnacle Industries. Mr. Morrison has stolen my research and is presenting it as his own." Amanda Rodriguez, the journalist, was already on her feet, recording everything and preparing to publish the story that would destroy Jake's career and expose the corruption at Pinnacle Industries. "That's a serious accusation," the summit moderator said, approaching the stage. "Do you have evidence to support this claim?" Elena opened her laptop and connected it to the auditorium's projection system. Within seconds, the screens around the room displayed a side-by-side comparison of Jake's presentation and David's original documentation, complete with timestamps, file creation dates, and metadata proving David's authorship. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Every slide, every algorithm, every technical specification was identical. The timestamps showed that David's work predated Jake's files by months. The video log showed David explaining his development process in detail, using the same technical language that Jake had just presented to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena announced to the stunned audience, "what you've just witnessed is corporate theft on a massive scale." Jake Morrison has built his career by stealing the work of talented employees and presenting it as his own. This is not an isolated incident. It's part of a systematic pattern of fraud that has been covered up by Pinnacle Industries for years. Jake tried to respond, but his words were incoherent. He claimed that David had stolen the work from him, that the evidence was fabricated, that this was all some kind of conspiracy, but his explanations made no sense, and the evidence against him was too comprehensive to dispute. Security personnel approached the stage as the audience buzzed with excitement and outrage. This wasn't just a case of plagiarism. It was a public exposure of corporate corruption at one of the tech industry's most respected companies. "Mr. Morrison," the summit moderator said, "in light of these allegations and the evidence presented, we're going to have to suspend your presentation pending a full investigation." As Jake was escorted off the stage, he looked directly at me for the first time. I saw recognition in his eyes, followed by rage and fear. He knew that his career was over, that his reputation was destroyed, and that the comfortable life he had built on stolen work was about to collapse around him. But I felt no satisfaction in his downfall. I felt only relief that the truth had finally been revealed. Within hours, Amanda Rodriguez's story was published online and picked up by major news outlets around the world. Tech executive exposed for massive fraud at Global Summit became the top trending story on social media. Videos of the confrontation went viral, with millions of people watching Jake Morrison's public humiliation and David Chen's brave stand for truth. The story didn't end with Jake's exposure. Our evidence revealed the full scope of the corruption at Pinnacle Industries, leading to a federal investigation that ultimately resulted in criminal charges against Jake and several executives, including Marcus Blackwood. The company's stock price plummeted, and several victims of the theft scheme came forward to share their stories. I became the face of the whistleblower movement, speaking at conferences and congressional hearings about corporate fraud and the need for stronger protections for employees who report misconduct. Major companies began implementing new policies to prevent intellectual property theft, and several states passed laws making it easier for victims to seek justice. David Chen became a hero in the tech community, founding his own cybersecurity company based on his revolutionary protocol. Elena Vasquez was hired by the FBI as a consultant on corporate fraud cases, using her technical skills to help investigate white-collar crime. As for me, I was offered my choice of executive positions at several major tech companies. But instead of returning to the corporate world that had betrayed me, I decided to start my own consulting firm, helping other victims of workplace fraud and corporate theft. 6 months after that humiliating morning when Jake Morrison stole my presentation, I stood on the same stage at the Global Tech Summit, delivering a keynote address about corporate integrity and the power of truth. The audience gave me a standing ovation, not just for my presentation, but for my courage in exposing a system of corruption that had destroyed so many careers. They humiliated me, I told the audience, until the world saw me as the hero of the story. But I'm not the real hero here. The real heroes are the people who choose truth over comfort, justice over security, and integrity over personal gain. The real heroes are the people who refuse to stay silent when they witness wrongdoing, even when speaking up costs them everything. As I looked out at the audience, the same industry that had once rejected and discredited me, I realized that my fall from grace had been necessary for my rise to something greater. I had lost a job, but I had found my purpose. I had been humiliated, but I had emerged stronger. I had been cast as the villain of my own story, but I had rewritten the ending. And now, when people heard the name Sarah Mitchell, they didn't think of a delusional former executive who had made false accusations. They thought of the woman who had exposed one of the biggest corporate fraud schemes in Silicon Valley history, the whistleblower who had chosen truth over comfort, and the hero who had turned her greatest defeat into her most important victory. Legal disclaimer: this story is completely fictional and created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, actual events, or real institutions is purely coincidental.